You probably know Canada for maple syrup, hockey, and people who apologize too much. But there is a stranger side to this country that most people never hear about. A town that outlawed the color orange, a lake that can kill you just by touching it, a province where it is legal to pay your taxes with dead beavers. In this video, we are counting down 20 of the most unhinged, logic-defying facts about Canada that sound completely made up but are 100% real. Stay with me to the end, because number 1 is a law so strange that most Canadians do not even know it exists. So hit subscribe and let's begin. Number 20. In the province of Quebec, it is technically illegal to sell margarine that is colored yellow. The law dates back to the 1940s, when dairy farmers pushed for regulations to stop margarine from looking too much like butter. For decades, margarine in Quebec had to be sold white, or occasionally pink, so shoppers would never confuse it with the real thing. The rule stuck around far longer than anyone expected, and it was not fully struck down until 2008, when a court finally ruled the color restriction unconstitutional. For over 60 years, an entire province ate pale, unnaturally colored spread because of a turf war between butter and margarine. Number 19. Canada has more lakes than the rest of the world combined. The country holds somewhere around 2 million lakes, and roughly half of all the lakes on Earth larger than a square kilometer sit within its borders. There is so much water that huge stretches of the country have never been properly mapped lake by lake. Pilots flying over the Canadian Shield in Ontario or Quebec often look down and see nothing but a shattered mirror of blue, stretching to the horizon in every direction, most of it with no name at all. Number 18. There is a lake in British Columbia that can genuinely hurt you. Spotted Lake, near Osoyoos, is packed with such a high concentration of minerals like magnesium sulfate and calcium that in the summer heat, the water evaporates into hundreds of separate mineral pools, each ringed by a hardened crust of salt. The lake has been sacred to the Silix Okanagan people for generations, but the mineral content is so extreme that swimming in it is not recommended. From the air, it looks less like a lake and more like a giant slab of alien polka dot glass sitting in the desert scrubland of the Okanagan Valley. Number 17. Canada is home to a town that legally changed its name to promote a chocolate bar. In 1958, the small Ontario town of Taylor Corners renamed itself Dresden briefly, and later, in a marketing stunt, the town of Cupar, Saskatchewan, and a few others flirted with corporate name changes. But the most famous case is Asbestos, Quebec, which changed its name entirely in 2020. Not for a chocolate bar, but because a whole town did not want to keep sharing its name with a deadly carcinogen. The town is now called Val-des Sources, and it took over 60 years of residents living with a name that scared off visitors before they finally pulled the trigger. Number 16. In Canada, it is illegal to pay a debt using only pennies if the total exceeds 25 cents. Under the country's Currency Act, coins are only considered legal tender up to certain limits. Pennies max out at 25 cents, nickels at $5, and even loonies and toonies have upper limits before a business can legally refuse them. Canada actually phased out the penny entirely back in 2013, but the old coin laws remain on the books, a strange leftover rule for a coin that barely exists anymore. Number 15. There's a species of squirrel in Canada that can survive being frozen to nearly minus 30 degrees Celsius, technically colder than its own blood should allow. Arctic ground squirrels in the Yukon lower their body temperature below freezing during hibernation, becoming what scientists call supercooled. Their blood and tissues somehow avoid forming ice crystals even at sub-zero temperatures, a biological trick researchers still do not fully understand. For half the year, these small animals are, for all practical purposes, colder than a glass of ice water and still alive. Number 14. Canada has an official national war memorial dedicated partly to a horse. Warrior, a horse that famously survived World War I, was honored posthumously. But Canada's own military history holds an even stranger tribute. Winnie, a black bear cub bought at a train station in White River, Ontario in 1914, who became the mascot of a Canadian Army brigade, was later donated to the London Zoo and directly inspired the name of Winnie the Pooh, a Canadian soldier's wartime pet bear is the reason one of the most famous fictional bears in the world exists. Number 13. In parts of Newfoundland, there is a local delicacy involving the seal flipper, and there are dishes made from a fermented shark so toxic in its raw form that it can cause intoxication and even death if eaten unprepared. The Greenland shark is naturally full of trimethylamine oxide, a compound that breaks down into something close to antifreeze when the animal is alive. Traditional preparation buries the meat, ferments it for months, then air dries it, a process that takes something lethal and turns it into a dish some Canadians and their northern neighbors still eat today. Number 12. The town of Churchill, Manitoba has stricter rules about polar bears than most cities have about stray dogs. Because Churchill sits directly on a major polar bear migration route, residents leave their cars unlocked so people can escape into them in an emergency, and the town maintains a facility nicknamed Polar Bear Jail, a holding building where wandering bears are kept until they can be safely relocated away from town. Getting arrested in Churchill might mean you, or possibly a 500-pound bear, are spending the night in a cell. Number 11. Canada once had a currency made partly of playing cards. In the late 1600s, the French colonial government in Quebec ran short of official coins from France. Officials began signing regular playing cards, marking them with denominations, and circulating them as emergency currency. For decades, ordinary card decks doubled as legal money throughout New France, a system so effective it was used on and off for nearly a century before proper paper currency took over. Number 10. There is a Canadian province where the northern lights are visible so often that some communities plan tours entirely around them. In the Northwest Territories, the town of Yellowknife sits almost directly beneath the auroral oval, the ring around the magnetic pole where the aurora is most active. On a clear winter night, residents can see the northern lights more than 200 nights a year, turning a phenomenon most people travel across the world to witness into a fairly routine part of the local sky. Number 9. Canada is home to a desert, despite being famous for snow and ice. The also-used desert in British Columbia's Okanagan Valley is part of North America's northernmost true desert ecosystem, home to rattlesnakes, scorpions, and cactus, all thriving within a country most people associate with permafrost and polar bears. Summers here regularly climb past 40 degrees Celsius, a wild contrast tucked into the same country as the Arctic tundra a few thousand kilometers north. Number 8. There is a Canadian law that technically still allows citizens to hunt Bigfoot, but only under strict conditions. British Columbia has never officially outlawed Sasquatch hunting, but wildlife officials have stated that if a Sasquatch were ever proven to exist, it would automatically fall under provincial wildlife protection laws, making it illegal to hunt without a permit. Canada has, in effect, preemptively protected a creature it has never confirmed is real. Number 7. In 1919, the Great Molasses Flood happened in Boston, but Canada had its own strange industrial disaster just a few years earlier. In 1926, a burst dam near Britannia Beach, British Columbia, sent a wall of mine tailings and floodwater through a mining town, killing dozens in minutes. Stranger still, the mining company was operating one of the largest copper mines in the British Empire at the time. A booming operation now remembered mainly through a small museum and the ruins the flood left behind. Number 6. Canada has an official ministry dedicated partly to managing beavers as a form of currency history. Beaver pelts were so central to Canada's early economy that the Hudson's Bay Company created a unit of trade called the Made Beaver, essentially using the value of one prime beaver pelt as a universal currency to price everything from guns to blankets across the fur trade. The beaver was not just a national symbol. For over a century, it was quite literally money. Number 5. A Canadian town legally requires residents to shovel snow off their roof or face a fine. But one town took winter law even further. In Rossland, British Columbia, at the peak of heavy snow years, local bylaws have required homeowners to clear both sidewalks and roofs within specific time frames to prevent structural collapse, with fines issued to anyone who lets the snow pile dangerously high. Winter in parts of Canada is not just weather. It is a legal obligation. Number 4. Canada has a lake so acidic and lifeless that scientists use it to study conditions similar to other planets. Pavilion Lake in British Columbia contains bizarre freshwater formations called microbialites, rock-like structures built by microorganisms that resemble the earliest life forms on ancient Earth. NASA and the Canadian Space Agency have both sent divers down to study the lake, treating this quiet mountain lake in the interior of British Columbia as a stand-in for what life on Mars might once have looked like. Number 3. There is a town in Saskatchewan that was, for a brief period, entirely owned and operated by one man, down to the church, the store, and the houses. Val-Marie and several other prairie towns began as company towns tied to railway expansion in the early 1900s, where a single land developer or rail company controlled nearly every building. Residents rented their homes from the same company that employed them, ran the store they shopped at, and even built the church they prayed in. A level of control over daily life that would be almost unthinkable in a Canadian town today. Number 2. Canada's Hell's Gate, a narrow canyon on the Fraser River in British Columbia, funnels more water per second at its peak than Niagara Falls, despite being far less famous. The gorge is so narrow and the current so violent that early explorers reported losing horses and supplies, simply trying to cross it. Today, a cable tram carries tourists safely over the canyon, but the raw force of water squeezed through solid rock remains one of the most powerful, least known natural spectacles in the entire country. And finally, number 1. Canada is the only country in the world with a coastline on 3 different oceans: the Atlantic, the Pacific, and the Arctic, giving it the longest coastline of any nation on Earth by a massive margin at roughly 202,000 kilometers. That number is so large, it is almost impossible to picture. It is long enough to circle the Earth at the equator nearly 5 times over. Entire stretches of that coastline, particularly in the high Arctic, have never been walked by a human being, let alone mapped in detail. Canada does not just border oceans. It quietly holds more shoreline than any other country in human history, and most of it sits so far north that almost no one will ever see it in person. I hope you have enjoyed this video, so make sure to share it with your friends and see you in the next video.